Hey, I'm glad to be back talking about anger resolution. We're in part two of this podcast series. And I want to say that a few scriptures of what the Bible talks about when it comes to anger resolution. But I'm glad that you're tapping into this because, like I said on the last one, the average person, when you say, "Hey, let's talk about resolving anger," they're like, "I don't have an anger problem." And they're actually most of the time angry when they say that. But in any case, we all have anger issues, and the issues can just be that we don't have the skill set to know how to deal with situation. You might be an person, and after a while, you realize in certain situations you're not. Most of the time you are, but there's those certain things you don't have the skill set to deal with. So in the New Living Bible, it says in Proverbs 19:11, sensible people control their temper. They earn respect by overlooking wrongs. Well, that doesn't also mean you have to take the Bible as a whole. Jesus didn't just keep overlooking wrongs. He wasn't a doormat that people just ran over. But it basically says, pick your battles in a sense, like you should be able to overlook smaller things. But small things can add up to you stuffing all those different things and not knowing how to deal with them. And then you explode like a volcano. And it says sensible people control their temper. Well, we talked about trying to figure out how you're tempered. You have to be able to write down what was role modeled to you through the circle around you, the people that were in authority over you. Those are the people that count first. Then you have even an older brother. Maybe they reacted to you a certain way, and that caused you to learn how to deal with anger in a good way or in a bad way. And so these are things that we're trying to identify. It even says in Proverbs 22, 24, and 25 in the NIV, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. A snare is a trap, right? They use snares to hunt rabbits or whatever. And you don't want to get caught into a trap. If you see that a person in your life is consistently angry, they're not working on the project, they're not gaining new skill sets or anything like that, that might be a person to back off of for a time until they change or permanently, because it basically tells you what can happen. And you'll start talking like them. A lot of times people are throwing F-bombs all over the place for small little things that aren't that big a deal that you could actually overlook. If the trash didn't get picked up by 10 and you thought it was going to be, you can actually overlook that. It's not solving world peace. It's not something that, if we don't get this solved, everyone's getting hurt and we've got to protect or anything like that. It's just, it didn't go out until 10. So it is what it is. And so that's kind of what it's saying. But to say to back off from a person, there are times we have to do that. Now, what if you're married to a person that's like that? Same thing. There is a level that it's like you have to remember when that's going on all the time, it's destroying you. So you either have to figure out a boundary in the home that will help that, or you've got to back out of that situation or it will damage you. So we talked a little bit about, being able to identify how we were tempered. And then we're going to put in a different mix. We use the paint can as a illustration where we're able to say, hey, we're going to go get a certain color. We want to achieve a certain thing, but they mixed all the wrong colors up at Walmart or Menards or whoever was mixing your paint. The people that put that mix in as a child, it really affects us. And so how we see life, our relationship experiences, we see it differently by how we're tempered. And then a person without self-control is like a city with broken down walls. That's Proverbs 25, 28 in the New Living. And so literally, if you don't have self-control, then you can not have self-control, when it comes to eating a piece of cake, and that'll have an effect if you eat a whole pan because you didn't have self-control. But you could hurt someone else, and because you didn't have self-control, you end up in prison. And so it's a spectrum that we have to look at and say, something out of control always has an effect. And because it has an effect, then we have to figure out, where is that coming from? We have to dig through this and figure it out so we can get control of ourselves. So really, to say I couldn't control myself and I road raged somebody off the road and a person was killed and now I'm in prison. Well, because you couldn't control yourself, now the prison is controlling you. You put yourself in a spot where it's like, I can't control myself, so someone else has to control me. And a lot of times people will do things that don't have self-control, and then they end up in jail for a while, or they end up, on probation, or, they've got to do community service, whatever it is. And as soon as they're outside of the structure of that other control, they go do something again, which proves they can't control themselves. They never got that skill set. They're not evil people. They just never got the skill set. And so it's really important, especially under the age of 7, that we learn how to deal with anger. We learn to deal with these different things, and we get those skill sets. Now, self-control is part of the fruit of the Spirit. So when you come to Christ and his kingdom begins to dwell in you because you've invited that in, his rulership, you're giving over control to him, and then he is able to show you how to control yourself. You have to have somebody role model it, right? Because he's totally about self-control. Jesus never just gets out of control. If he does something with a boundary, like when he went through the temple and he turned tables, that was on purpose. That was methodically, that's what he felt that he needed to do to bring order into the church, just like when our military shows up somewhere. It isn't our soldiers lost control and now they're over in a different country. No, they have orders. There's a boundary that needs to be upheld, and they signed up to be able to do that. So just so there's no confusion when it comes to the word self-control. The other thing that I want to show you is, years ago, I went through the Art Academy of Minnesota, and I just felt to graduate out of that. When I was younger, I started something and never finished it. So I went back and decided to do this. And I don't use art as a way of making money or anything, but it really helped me with skill sets just to be able to draw and have fun. So I want to show you the picture here on the right has the red, the one that has all the red on it. Those are comments from a teacher. This is the picture here that I drew. And I can tell you, I drew it. You're supposed to do it many times and they'll give you a time limit. And so I drew it in a short period of time, just looking at the picture they had. And I was kind of pumped about it. I was like, I think I got this really close to what they had on paper. My interpretation is like right there. And so I sent it in and I was automatically thinking, I bet you I get an A on this. I wasn't humble about it at all. I just was so pumped about the picture. I thought it was cute. And somehow I got their drawing back with all kinds of comments. Now, what happens when we start digging into our heart and we start thinking at any point that we've arrived, or like, no, I already know how to do that. No, I know how to control my temper. I have self-control. You don't understand. Well, even in your best picture, like really, my best picture over here, it's not bad. It's all right. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. But when you look at this picture over here, this picture lets me know there's somebody who's gone places I haven't gone and has a skill set I don't have. And so they're able to see what I'm lacking. That's, in a sense, coming under authority. Now, I could have wrote the school and when they gave me a lower grade than I thought I should get and shoot them out and done all this kind of stuff. But I have to trust that these art teachers that are judging these things and that are critiquing these things, they actually have a higher skill set than I do. Like, who am I to tell them how the picture's off? And really, when I study their picture, it does look better than my picture. So even if your picture looks great, in your mind, you're like, this is a great picture. People might be able to see in your life And they'll make those red marks that say, no, you're actually damaging people over here. Let's say if it's regarding anger resolution, you're not able to solve it totally. Your voice tone is out of control. Those types of things. We have to be able to come under authority. We have to be able to take critiquing. We have to be able to take somebody saying, nope, that's not up to par. Sorry, go try again. And I can tell you, when I got that in the mail, I wasn't a 10 on the scale of 1 to 10, but I was irritated. I was like, no, I did good. I should have got this grade, and you shouldn't have to have it perfect. I mean, all kinds of stuff started coming up when really they're grading my work according to what it should look like. And it doesn't look like it should. It looks all right, but it doesn't look like it should. I hope this illustration helped you out, just to try to make sure as we're getting into this, we're looking at things appropriately. I believe that we all have skill sets we can improve, and that we can get at and use at different times. Even the word patience in the Greek in the Bible means to bear up under. You're able to stand under something. We can't stand under something and we can't bear up under something unless we have understanding. Well, to understand something, then we first need knowledge. So knowledge is the base, then comes understanding, then comes wisdom, and wisdom comes from God. And I love it when we have that knowledge and that understanding, and it creates a landing pad for wisdom to come and rest. Wisdom causes us to look back and see what used to be, what is now, and where we're going in the future. Remember what I said the last podcast? Anger will make you focus right in front of you. You'll get fixated. Your brain will just get stuck, and you're like, no, they need to do this, and they need to, and no matter how someone talks to you, like, no, this has got to happen, and it'll just get stuck. And I gave the illustration of the two dogs fighting. That's exactly what happens to a lot of people, because we didn't start out saying, actually, I'm going to come under authority, somebody who's bigger than I. The Word of God is bigger than I. The Word of God is Jesus, and it's bigger than who I am. He is love. I'm not love. At my best day, in my best timing, with my, best of everything, I'm nowhere near as loving as Jesus is. So he's the higher thought. He's the high place. He is all wisdom. And what he laid out for us on this earth is walking through things. It really showed us, wow, he had the skill set because he's love. And in certain places, he would just keep his mouth quiet because there was no sense in saying anything. Other places, he would address the Sanhedrin and people and say different things. He flipped tables at another thing. But then when it came to dying on the cross, that was his assignment. So a lot of people think, well, he was I had one guy tell me one time, he was wussy, because why would you let, if you're God, why would you let everybody just come and take you, and you didn't fight back and you were hauled away? Well, his assignment was not to fight back. His assignment was to lay down his life. So they didn't take his life. He laid it down. Big difference. We need to understand this as we go into looking at anger resolution. And the other thing I want to say is I hope that in me talking to you, you don't feel talked at, but talked to, number one. And then the second thing that I'm hoping is that you find safety in finding out about yourself. Now, watching a podcast can be a safer way than going to a class with people you don't know and you don't feel safe. Do you know that when we're in those spots, many times we don't learn as well, because you have to, in order to learn, you have to feel safe. You have to not be worried about your surroundings and who said what and who's looking at who. I mean, I think we need to grow and to be able to go into classes and things. But if you're that person who is like, I just need to get some of this information on my own, and then I might come into something once I'm comfortable seeing myself. And so if you're that person, this podcast series is definitely for you. Um, but in any case, when we are looking at ourselves, uh, once we see that underlying anger and we're saying, I want something to stop, then we first learn how to have the boundaries to make something stop. A lot of times classes are taught where it's like, well, you're angry. Here's how you can make it stop. If you don't know yourself, you're not going to make anything stop. And so the first skill set is to see how you were tempered. The second one is to see yourself. Now, this was interesting and funny. Maybe not funny at the time. I don't know. My husband and I took some classes on life skills to learn how to communicate better and stuff years and years ago. And one of the things they talked about in knowing when you're angry is your posture changes. The way you hold your face is different, your expressions. You might put your hand on your hip or stuff like that. And you were supposed to ask the other person, what do I look like when I'm angry? I was a little nervous about that. But man, I right away knew what my husband looked like. His eyebrows will go down. He tilts his head like this if he's angry. And his voice gets louder. Not louder like screaming, but just gets more. He's got a big, full voice anyway, but it'll get more firm. His words get a little shorter when he's mad. So I was able to name that. Like, there it is, buddy. There it is. And I'm thinking, oh, there can't be that much. I mean, he saw me so good. And it was like, for instance, he said, you will all of a sudden step back, your one leg will come forward and your one hip will kind of turn to the side. And then I'll posture with my head like this. And instead of my eyebrows coming down, I'm more like, excuse me. That's the look. Well, I'm debating at that point where we're going to go and where this thing is going to travel to. And then sometimes if it's a real edgy situation, I will have my hands toward my hips, almost like I've got a gun belt on, and my one hand will twitch a little bit. It'll be ready for something. I don't know what we're getting ready for, but that's how my body reacts. I did not see that. And the first thing I did is that I don't do that. And I put my hand over by my hip, and my hip went out to the side, and I did everything that he said I normally did. And we both started laughing. I'm like, oh, and it was an aha moment where it was like, that's what I do. I never saw that about me. So sometimes we can think I'm disciplining a child, I'm instructing somebody. All I did was say. But the problem is 96% of our learning and safety and being able to record and all those things come through visual. So if I'm telling my kids to clean their room and my whole visual body just is like, you clean your room, and I've got this whole, thing where I'm really posturing myself big. I'm just bigger than who you are and louder and all that kind of stuff. And then later they'll say, Mom, you hurt my feelings when you didn't. And I'm like, all I did was tell you to clean your room. That's not actually all that happened there. Your whole body took a dominating stance where you should be able to move a prisoner, arrest somebody, do some of these bigger skill things very calmly. I'm sorry, sir, you're going to need to get in the car, right? You ever heard an officer say that? The one who dominates up and feels like they have to use their body language to really show you they have control, that invokes rage in other people. That invokes a fight. And even if the person is just losing it totally, if your child's losing it totally, we can't give them that. We can't come up to the level that they go. Later, you might take a walk and work that through and have to use your skills on yourself, because you realize, man, I really just, your teeth started gritting. You had all these reactions that you really wanted to take control of that situation. But you slow down your speech and you're able to say, honey, remember, we went over this rule. You're actually not allowed to be jumping on the couch. It's a brand new couch, and we have asked you not to do that. And they can literally lose their mind. Sometimes children will be like, "Wah," and they just go into a thing or what. You don't change your posture. Even if you're dishing out, timeout or other things, chores or whatever it is, it's all done in that same tone of voice. Because what they're doing is learning that if you have to posture up and get as loud as them when they're throwing a fit, they have quite a bit control. And they're seeing that. And so their mind calculates just like a raptor. It's more of like, if I got her this upset by doing this, what else can I do? Or finally, I'll get my way. Where when you stay even, you're unpredictable. It's more like, wow, mom's holding the line. No matter what I do, I throw a fit, I do whatever. Well, now you lose this toy. Now you're going to get this chore or whatever. And I'm sorry you're making these choices. This is your choices to make, but, there's going to be some consequences when it comes to that. When they see that, they have to totally reposition themselves. But if you were raised by parents that yelled to motivate you, have you ever noticed their yelling got turned off later on? Because you were scared half to death of it to begin with. And after a while, you're like, whatever. It's just mom losing her mind. And so then you don't listen. And if it takes 5 yells to get you to do something, then later on you'll move that bar till 10, or your parents will just go do it themselves because they can't get you to do it. Where I have learned, I mean what I mean when I say it. And I don't have to lose my mind over it to get you to do something. It's your poor behavior, not mine. And I'm trying to help you work through this. And whatever you got to do to work through your anger, guess what? You're going to do that. But then you're still going to take the garbage out and you're still going to do your chore. I'm trying to understand you. I'm here for you. I'll even try to figure out what that underlying anger is about. It could just be as simple as they wanted to play a video game. But a lot of times kids will buck a system because there's this feeling that they have. And the feeling is, I always get stuck with the garbage because no one cares about me in this family. I mean, I'm the one, why do I get the trash jobs and so gets to do such and such? Or I always have to wash the toilet. And, and they need to be heard out. They need to be heard out. And you say, all right, well, this week take the garbage out. We'll switch around with brothers and sisters. It's that simple. But if we don't hear them, they're just going to keep rooted in that anger and they're going to act that anger out and you're going to hear it and you're going to feel it. And then you have to control yourself because as they're escalating up toward a 12, instead of, being maybe at a 5 to express themselves, maybe down at a 3 even would be more appropriate. Then when that happens, you've got to control yourself even more in order to help them through what you're trying to train them. Okay. Discipline can demand waiting sometimes. I remember telling our kids a way to control myself is I didn't give the consequences right away. I would say, well, there's going to be consequences for this. But what, Mom? What? What are the consequences? Mom, I'm thinking about it. And I would let them sit in that because what I was doing is de-escalating my insides so that I didn't pull some big levers. Because once you're pulling bigger levers, your consequences sound like, you will never go to your friends ever again. And you can't ever. And I'm going to throw that video game in the garbage. And it's way, way out there. Whether if you took the time to control yourself, you would think of something that was level to the crime. Stealing a piece of gum, you shouldn't be sent to prison for 20 years, right? Killing someone, that's a different program. But many times our anger causes us to give sentencing in a way that's way over the top compared to the crime. And some things don't actually need something. They just need training. It's something you just need to talk to the person about. You get the training and it works well. So I wanted you to see that as a way of understanding these are some of the things that when you're identifying your temperament, you're able to look in and go, yeah, I guess I do that. I guess I do that. We have to figure out where these things came from and why we do it. So what I see with parents, for instance, if they were yelled at a lot, they make sure sometimes they'll just yell at their kids the same because that's how they were raised. But there's other people who just let their kids run over them because they were yelled at when they were a kid, and I never want to have that happen to my kids. And so there's no discipline at all. See how it can throw you in the ditch? One person's poor behavior can drive your car right in the ditch. And God is always in the middle. He's not these extremes. So anytime you have an extreme in your life, you better double check that. You better check that out because extremes are ditches. And the boundaries that follow extremes are usually the person who lays down and lets everybody run over them. All the boundaries are for themselves in a way of like, well, I can't do this and I can't do that. They turn boundaries on themselves. Boundaries are for yourself. And we don't put boundaries on another person. You know what that sounds like? It's like, if you don't clean your room, I'm going to do such and such. And by golly, it'll be the last time that now I'm drawing a boundary on the person rather than saying, here's your choices. I've asked you to clean your room twice. I will not ask you again. And here's the thing you're going to lose. And here's the thing you could gain. Now it's up to you. Make a choice. And some kids will try that and just make a poor choice just to see if you'll do it. And sure enough, then you got to take the things away or whatever. But it was their choice. I'm not having a bird about it because I didn't make the choice. They made the choice. But it's my job as the adult there to lay out the choices. But if I'm out of control, I can't come up with the choices. My choices are in ditches. And they're supposed to choose in that, which is just going to cause confusion and breakdowns and escalation. And the whole situation gets worse. You see that? So let's go back to talking about safety. We don't learn in situations if we don't feel safe. We don't express if we don't feel safe. So trying to work through something with other people, many times we don't feel safe sharing our emotions. So we've got to be able to come to dealing with ourselves first, and until we feel safe enough that we've grown enough within ourselves that now we're going to start dealing with people. So it is the fact of identifying how you're tempered, how you act those things out. What do you look like even when you're mad? And are you making people feel safe around you? Or is the first unsafe feeling your first emotion and anger the second? Is that really why you get angry? You don't feel safe. You don't feel safe that you're going to be heard. You don't feel safe that someone's not going to leave you. You don't feel safe in so many different realms that there's no safety, so nobody gets to grow. Coming into a situation with our children, with our spouse, with anybody that we're trying to work out stuff to, it has to be safe. That's why many times you'll come into counseling, because it's more safe in counseling to say some things because you know that counselor, if they're a good counselor, is not going to let this thing escalate. Like, you're not going to come into my office and pop off and be cussing out your wife or vice versa. I'm not going to let that happen. But you do that at home for sure. That's why you're in counseling. But we always see a different perspective when people come into the office, because why? There's a boundary there just by being that outside person. And sometimes it's so messy and it's gone on for so long that we do need the outside person to bring a level of safety that says, okay, well, we're not going to hit each other, do any of that stuff because we're in Pastor Mary's office. And so we know that can't happen. She's not going to let that happen. So that's great. That's great to be able to do that. Sometimes people will go to a restaurant to work through something because they know they can't pop off at a restaurant. They can't escalate at a restaurant, and it keeps their voice lower and they talk slower, and they're able to deal with the thing in their relationship or their business in a different way because they know they can't go past this. There's that certain level you can't go past. So you're creating safety. If a woman tells her husband, but honey, I'm crying because I feel this way. And the response back is, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You already took her safety away. So there's no progress going to be happening on that subject or in that arena. You took her safety away. The same thing can happen from a woman to a man where the woman gets critical. It's like, well, you always, blah, blah. Well, you took his safety away. This is where when I learned these skill sets, I remember my husband and I, it was getting escalated about a certain subject or whatever. And I knew I had to use the skill sets. And he knew he had to use the skill sets. And then all of a sudden you don't know what to say because all the things that come to you are the thing you shouldn't be doing. It's the thing that you've used so many times that never took you anywhere good. But now you're pulling to find that thing you can say in the moment to be like, okay, so now I'm in a spot where I got to say what's right. Oh, I don't want to say that. I really want to just spout off about something or whatever. So then it takes the self-control. This is a practice skill. So many people have learned about the skills, and then when they go to do it, they're upset that they can't pull it off. That's like taking karate. You show up the first class and you think you should be a black belt. It's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to practice. There has to be a practicing that you hone the skill. You're pulling on the Holy Spirit and saying, help me with self-control. Help me to be able to stand under something. Patience. Patience is to stand up under something, even though it's hard. So I want to share a little story before we get on to part 3. And that is one time my husband and I were doing drywall in the basement of our house. And our shed was a bit away from our house. It wasn't like right next door to it or whatever. And we thought we had enough screws for the drywall and this type of stuff. And then we found out right in the middle of hanging something in the ceiling, we were out of screws. And so he's like, oh no, this will crack off if I let go of this. You know, I got to run and get screws. I said, I got it. I can hold it. So I'm on a ladder and I'm holding it. Okay, cool. And then I'm holding it some more. Okay, like he ran to the shed to get these screws and I'm like, okay, where is he? I'm starting to feel like I need him right now because it was getting heavier and heavier because that end was hanging down and I'm holding it. That's a picture of patience. That's a picture where you're bearing up under something. It isn't that God gives us patience and then suddenly we can just take everything and we just feel wonderful all the time. Now, when you're bearing up under something, I actually had some anger shoot through me. Like, he is taking way too long. This is starting to hurt. I'm bearing up under this. Why isn't he here? All these different things. And when he came, there was such a relief. When I got off the ladder, I was like, ah. But that's a picture of how we need to learn how to bear up and not go from 1 to a 12 or 1 to a 10 where we're riding the edge of rage. God wants to do this in our hearts, but we have to learn the skill set. It's going to take work, and we got to posture ourselves in a way where we're coming under authority, and he is the biggest authority. When I told the Lord that I would serve him, that he was my master, that I invited his kingdom into my heart, forgive my sins, when I did that, it changed everything. Why? Because I stopped being the one in control. I kept relying on him. So he gave me the strength to bear up. I didn't pull that strength from myself. If that would have been the past, there would have been some choice words and some things like that. But once I've been forgiven, I can bear up. He gives me the strength to bear up and be patient and have self-control and be able to look at myself and say, what's going through me right now? And really, if I wanted to, at the point where it was taking long enough that I was starting to, question where my husband was, you know what it hit? It hit the fact that in life, at times I've been abandoned. And it was like, I'm in pain, is what the brain said. And the heart said, he left you over something silly like going to get more equipment. My brain interpreted that like, how could he just do this to me? He left me like this. And so if I'd allowed myself, I'd have got way out of control anger. I wouldn't have been over to, like Proverbs says, look over the wrong. I would have just went into like, how could you? And you were gone way too long and all of this kind of stuff. But I realized, you can actually think about the bigger picture. It took him a bit to find that. He had to run over there. He had to find the screws. He had to get the appropriate amount and then run back. And I'm learning to bear up under this. And so this is not his fault. He's not leaving me in a situation on purpose. I volunteered for it. But if I would have allowed myself and went back to my old way of thinking, that's probably where it would have come from. That little twinge of anger would have been, yep. I always get stuck in these situations. Here I am. It's heavy for me. He should know. And all of this stuff will start coming up. So when we learn how to examine our heart, we're actually learning how to identify what's going on in our soul, what's going on in the recordings of memories, what's going on inside of ourself. To be able to grab a hold of this thing and grab what's hurting in our heart and bring that to closure helps. It so helps. But then habits are the next thing then that will be dealt with. So anger resolution means you're trying to find the underlying thing so that can get healed so that the anger that is a secondary emotion is not used inappropriately.